here, so hopefully everyone can see this. Let's see. Welcome to the monthly Boulder Art Association monthly meeting. We're a nonprofit in Boulder, completely run by volunteers, and we love doing these kind of educational monthly meetings. And I'm so glad everybody could join us today. We started a tradition where folks can introduce themselves in the chat. If you want to just say who you are, where you live, if you want to put in there your Instagram or your website, you might be able to get some additional new followers to see your art online. And also, you know, what kind of art you do, and if you don't do art, what kind of art you like. I'd love to have you introduce yourself in the chat today. And you can also save the chat at the end of the call or whenever you want to. There's 3 little dots in the chat window and allows you to save off the chat. So if you want to follow people after the meeting, that might make it easier. And we've still got some more folks coming in, so welcome everybody. And we're going to be kind of open for interactive or chatting, but we want most people to be muted unless you wanted to talk. So let me know if you can just unmute yourself if you want to say something or add anything. We do weekly art critiques every Saturday morning, but we're taking a break during the month of May. So we're going to start up on June 5th. And information is on our website and also on Meetup. And these are really fun, interactive ways to share your art and talk with other artists and get feedback on maybe something that you're having some questions about, or if you just want to share whatever new art you're working on. We love having people join us to these Saturday events coming back on June 5th. Also, the Boulder Art Association has a wall at the art gallery in downtown Boulder. And we've got several Boulder Art Association artists which are featured this year, and this is a list of them and the dates that they're going to be showing. And we encourage everybody to stop by. There's some really incredible art at Art Gallery and also by our members at that location. Also, our June meeting is coming up on June 8th, and we've got really excited to get Jessica Moon Bernstein, and she's going to be talking to us about doing daily collages. She does some amazing collages. You can see her work on Instagram if you just Google her name in Instagram and see the kind of stuff that she's been doing. I think that's going to be a fun, interactive meeting coming up on June 8th. So encourage everybody to join us then. Also, our Boulder Art Association Summer Show is coming up on July 2nd through the 31st, and we're doing the call for entry right now that opened up yesterday, and it closes on June 13th. So we encourage everybody in the group to submit some art for that event. As long as you're a member, you'll be able to get into the show. And there's 2 pieces of art that we'd like you to do for this show. One is an 8-inch by 8-inch square image of something related to a bee, which is our part of the theme for the show. And then a second piece you can do around any theme, around the theme, what's the buzz? So it's really very open. And we think it's going to be a really fun and interesting show with this bee and buzz theme. And I know we've got Jill on the meeting today. I've been seeing the stuff that you're working on, Jill, for your bee-related art. So if anybody wants to submit anything and be in this show, we'd really love to have you. So I think it's going to be a great show. And that's at the Bus Stop Gallery in North Boulder. Let's see, next up, we have the sheep from our sheep exhibit, which is started actually in December and has been running in several places in Boulder, including the Museum of Boulder, and our gallery has now moved over, the sheep flock has now moved over to Ramble on Pearl Street, and it's going to be there for 3 months and started this last weekend. And I think it's going to be a great show. And Jeannie, I think you helped with the setup of that show, right? How did that go?
Oh, that was fabulous. We had some volunteers, members, and we were all over the place. We had ladders climbing up and down, and it's a great display. So if you can check it out, and the store actually is, well, you can read below. It's a nonprofit store. So it's a great place to shop because your money goes towards a great cause. And check out the art.
Yeah, thanks. And by the way, we've got several Boulder Art Association board members on the meeting today. So Jeannie, who just spoke, is our president. We've got Annie, who is our education chair. And I'm looking through the list here. I'm trying to see if there's anyone.
Jill?
Oh, Jill. Yeah, Jill is head of our marketing committee. And if anybody wants to join a great group of people and help volunteer with any of these committees, we'd love to have you help out. I know the exhibition committee is always looking for folks. And so if anybody wants to work with the art community in Boulder, we're a great way to do that. Let's see if I've got a couple more quick announcements. This one, I think we found it on our website, or I'm not sure where I found it, but there's going to be a plein air art exhibit around the Boulder County area art. And so just some information here. It's through the Boulder Parks and Open Space Foundation. And you can find that at boco.org/art show. That's in August. Also, I don't know if folks have seen this or not, but the Memorial Crane Project is at the Museum of Boulder through September 30th. It's 10,000 origami cranes honoring lives lost to COVID-19. And this is from Carla Funderburk's Memorial Crane Project. It's people that have seen it are just amazed by this exhibit. So I highly recommend people stopping by and seeing that. I know Beth, you're shaking your head. I think you said you saw it. And so we'd love to have more folks to see that great exhibit. Has anybody else seen that? I'm trying to see. Doesn't look like any other folks on here, but oh, Jeannie has, yeah. And let's see, also we wanted to announce that we're doing in collaboration with Rick Delgado out Boulder and the Denver Art Society, we're doing another music and dance festival, art music and dance festival at the Avalon. It's on, I think it's Arapahoe Road in Boulder, and this is going to be the first one this season is going to be June 12th from noon to 4. And right now, the call for artists is currently going on. So if you'd like to have a booth at this event, or maybe do some sort of other performing kind of thing, I'm not sure. There's a lot of different ways that you can get involved with this event. The booth space is extremely cheap, and all of the proceeds go directly to the artists who sold their art there. Last year, we did one event, and it was really successful. It was a drive-through event, but this year it's going to be a walking through event. And if you're not familiar with the location, it's a great covered parking lot with great protection from the sun, but it's still outdoors. So I think it's really great from a COVID and COVID perspective. I think although people I think will still be wearing masks, but this is going to be a really great event this year, and we plan to do it in a couple more months this year as well. So watch for dates on our website. And Jeannie, did I miss anything on that one? I think that's
well, it's located just past 55th, a little bit up the road on Arapahoe at
okay.
the Avalon Dance Place. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's
okay.
fabulous, and there's lots of space. You will be spaced, and you can park your car right next to your table. So it's a great location and real easy for artists.
Great, thanks, Jeannie. Let's see, let me just see what else I've got here. And also I found this online. So because we're not doing an art critique this month, I heard that the Longmont Artists Guild is doing a virtual art critique on May 12th. So if anybody's interested in that, that's tomorrow. And you can find information about that on their website. So I think that's all the announcements I have, unless I missed anything from the board members, let me know. But so I wanted to next introduce our speaker for tonight, professional fine artist and instructor Anne Kullaf. She's a graduate of the University of Bridgeport, Connecticut. She's taught workshops around the world, including Princeton University Art Museum, Edward Hopper House, several others listed there, some plein air workshops around the US, Canada, France, and Italy. She recently moved to Boulder, and she loves painting on Boulder's hiking trails and on the Pearl Street Mall. Maybe you've seen her there. And she also teaches some great workshops online, and she'll be telling you about that later on. So at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Anne, and welcome to the Boulder Art Association. We really appreciate you being here today.
Okay.
So I'll let you take it from here. Thanks, Anne. Let me stop sharing.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm really, really happy to be here. And as Ed was saying, I just moved to Boulder back in February. So all of this is new to me. I moved here from Philadelphia. I've lived on the East Coast my entire life. So it's really, really still shocking to me to walk out my front door and see these massive mountains, like only a few blocks away. So I'm really, really excited to have all this new types of scenery to paint. I'm meeting lots and lots of new people. I know some of you probably have seen my posts in the Boulder Collective. Sometimes I feel like I overpost, but we create art to share it. So at least that's what I think anyway. So I'm very excited to be working with you tonight. I'm going to be doing a demonstration in watercolor. I do work in all media, oils, some acrylic, but mostly oils, pastel, watercolor, pen and ink, charcoal, digital. And I teach all of those different media online. And watercolor is one of my favorites because it is so unpredictable and it's so expressive and so loose. And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize in my demo tonight is how to get the most out of watercolor, how to make the most of it, all of its wonderful expressive and loose properties without getting intimidated or overwhelmed by it. Okay, I think a lot of people, I think watercolor sometimes gets a little bit of a reputation as being unforgiving or being the hardest medium to work with. I think you have to just let yourself relax a little bit and think of it, remember it's only a piece of paper, and think of it as a series of actions and reactions. You touch the paper with your paint and it does something. And sometimes it does things that are just so beautiful and so unplanned that it seems a real shame to try and beat that watercolor into submission to get it to do exactly what you want it to do. So I try to help people to take a little bit more of a less tense approach, enjoy it a little bit more, rely on your skills, really, really go back to basics, things like form and value, rely on your drawing skills, all of that, it will play a huge part in the liveliness and vibrancy of not only your watercolors, but all the other media that you may choose to work in. So hopefully you'll get some good takeaways from tonight. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my demo camera. Okay, there we go. And this is the image that we are going to be working with today. This is actually a demo that I did for one of my watercolor classes, maybe it was last month's series of watercolor classes, where in this particular demo, we were focusing on color mixing and working with a limited palette. We're going to do some of that today, but we're also going to concentrate a lot on how you put the paint down on the paper, the paint to water ratio, how to move that brush around. And here's the really scary part that nobody should be afraid of, how to get started without doing a pencil drawing first, okay? I never start with a pencil drawing. I always jump right into watercolor. Now I'm going to move some of this stuff aside and I want to show you.
Anne, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's
are
all
you
right.
okay if I put your image in the chat so people can download it if they wanted to follow along?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not even sure exactly what you just asked me, but I'm okay with it. So.
Well, it's the photo.
This image.
It's the photograph of the tulips that you sent.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, that's actually better because one of the hardest thing about doing demos online is getting everything to fit into this camera view. Okay. So I have my little, I have my tulip reference on my phone over here. You already have that, so you don't need to really see it on my area. If I need to refer to it, I'll pull it in a little closer. But for the most part, I think it's most important that you see my paper, and that when I'm working, that you see my mixing tray. So before I start doing anything with that, I want to give you a little bit of a tour of my little sketchbook here. See, sometimes I put notes on here from that class. That was kind of a complicated color mixing class. But what I would like to do is just share with you so that you kind of know where I'm coming from. A few examples of my work, and hopefully the way that I work will, sort of resonate with you, be something that you might be interested in trying. I always, as I was saying before, I try to get the most out of the expressive qualities of watercolor, while at the same time, I want people to look at my work and sort of view it as a 50-50 mix of a representational, not photorealistic, but representational end result, combined with a lot of abstraction. And the abstraction comes in from the interplay of the white of the paper and the composition and all those wonderful darks and lights that we can get when working with a nice limited palette. Okay, I want to keep the eye moving around. I want to capture reflection believably, but not painstakingly. Okay, my goal is always to say it with as few strokes as possible. Now, I also have some demos in here that are from my combination watercolor and gouache class, and you can see that gets a slightly different look, because in some places I've used a few glazes of gouache, which of course is opaque, versus watercolor, which is transparent. And I may show you a little bit of some of that as well. This is a particularly interesting little 2-page spread that I wanted to make sure I shared with you. On the left is a monochromatic drawing, no pencil, just all green. I mixed up a nice green. I think I used raw sienna and Prussian blue. I even wrote it down. I mixed up those two colors, and I used that to create a value study of the painting that I did. This was another demo in my watercolor, one of my watercolor classes last month. I then did the same painting in color using these 4 colors. And this is actually the 4 colors we're going to work with today. Prussian blue, or if you don't have Prussian, phthalo blue, Windsor blue, any of the greenish blues is fine. Alizarin crimson, some Windsor yellow, azo yellow is fine, Hansa yellow, even lemon yellow would work, and some raw sienna. So it's a very limited palette, and that's what makes it hold together very well. The fewer colors you use, the less fighting you're going to have. But by doing this value study first, it really gets you familiar with the darks and lights in your composition, how dark or how light you're going to have to mix up your colors. When you're looking at, I paint from life most of the time, except from when I'm teaching online, because that's pretty much impossible. When you're looking at something live, you're looking at something in a photograph, the most important thing is for you to be aware of your dark and light values, to get a range of values from the white of the paper all the way to the darkest dark. The problem I see with a lot of watercolor that I've looked at is there's this fear of getting dark enough, okay? And I think that some of that comes from the fact that most watercolor artists who teach don't work in other media and have sort of put this concept out there that you can only work from light to dark when you work in watercolor. I don't do that. And you're going to see how incorporating a little bit of those darker values and those middle dark values in earlier on will allow you to say what you're trying to say a little bit more boldly. So here's another version of that rose that I showed you that had the gouache on it. This one is all pure transparent watercolor. This is a plant that I have in my house. I love working with greens. The key to getting a successful painting with green is to just have a lot of color variation. I mix all my greens. I make them either with Prussian blue or ultramarine, and then my two yellows, raw sienna and that Windsor yellow. Some radishes. So I'm just trying to giving you this little tour, and I'm almost done. The radishes in monochrome, little scooter that we did in the gouache class. Oh, and these were from my class yesterday, 2 demos, the beets and this one, which is actually very similar to what we've got to work with today, but it's irises instead. The reason I show you these is so that as I start to work and I start doing this little demo for you, I want you to know where we're headed. Okay, if you're expecting a really, really super tight photorealistic representation of something, that's not the way that I work. I like, as I said before, the expressiveness of it. I'm going to just show you this one. This was one that I did on Pearl Street last week. And I just love the orange umbrellas and the connection to these other things. I like to paint city scenes a lot. I used to do them in New York and in Philly all the time. But again, that's what I aim for, is that bold expressiveness that you can get with watercolor. Now, in order to do that, in order to capture that and have it be effective, you have to, number one, be very confident in your drawing skills. You need to get used to drawing with a brush. A brush is just like a pencil. It's just a different tool that you're using to put your marks down onto your paper. The difference between a brush and a pencil is that a brush is much more fluid. Now we have, I think we have almost about 2 full hours. So I'm going to actually give you 2 demos. Okay. Well, I'm going to start out. I'm going to paint this just in one color. Okay, because I would love for you to really see what I mean about getting those values down accurately, getting to know the forms, and getting to know how to keep that nice fluid movement going. Okay, so I'm going to do my first little study of this. I'm going to just take some Prussian blue. I'm taking Prussian blue because Prussian blue is nice and dark. If you're going to do monochromatic studies, value studies, you always want to pick a color. I have it over here. I'm sorry. I'm going to move that over here a little bit. That way you can see it. I always suggest if you're going to do a monochrome study, you want to do it with a color that's dark enough that you're able to really get a range of values. Prussian blue or Windsor blue or any of the blues is definitely going to be dark enough. Ultramarine is fine as well. The colors that I have on my palette today, we're just going to be using the Prussian blue, both yellows, the Windsor yellow and the raw sienna, and some alizarin crimson. But the other colors that I have this is like my signature sort of limited palette, are ultramarine and Windsor red, in addition to those ones that I said that we're going to use today. So let's get, yes.
So I put the list of materials that you had sent to us in the chat. So if anybody wants to look at those to see the colors that you're talking about.
That's fine.
And also, I just wanted to add a question about your palette. Is that like a ceramic
What is
palette?
It is a butcher's tray. It's enamel. It's metal. And I like this because it gives me a big space to work in. Unfortunately, when I'm online, I kind of have to limit the area because you can only see so much. But it's a nice fluid area. It's nice because the colors can sort of run into one another and you get a lot of variation. It's also very smooth. I like the fact that these colors all sort of just run into one another over here. Those little divided palettes just don't do it for me, but everybody's different. So this might make other people absolutely crazy by the fact that there's sort of no borders or anything. So that's kind of your choice. So the way that I envision this today, this is the way that I usually teach. Okay. This is your meeting. You can do what you want, but what I usually recommend to my people in my classes is I'll do it first. I'm going to do my little monochrome thing first. You can ask me questions while I'm working. In class, I don't do that, but here we can do that. You can just ask me questions. And And then after I'm done with my monochrome one, if you guys want to work on that for a while, want to ask questions as you go, that's fine. Then, depending on what time it is at that point, we'll take we'll have everybody work for a little bit with the monochrome. Then I'll go in, I'll do the full color demo. You can ask me questions while I'm doing it. And then after I'm done with that, you can start working on yours. And then towards the end, we'll share and we'll take a look and, whatever works for you guys. All right.
Okay, so Anne,
yeah.
just to let everybody know, just feel free to unmute yourself. And then if we have any background music or sound, we'll mute you afterwards, so you don't have to worry about that. But feel free to unmute yourself. We do have one question in the chat for you, Anne. It says, "What watercolor sketchbook do you use?"
Okay, this is a Canson. This is just a really inexpensive one. It's Canson XL watercolor paper. I use this for demos. I use it when I'm just, stuff that I'm not really trying to, make a masterpiece on. Oh, my camera just got out of focus. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, you know what we might want to do, Ed, if you spotlight my demo camera, when people ask questions, the image won't disappear.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. That way it won't be broken up, and people who, when they watch the demo later, even though the questions will come in, it won't, it won't be like a jumpy from the video, one thing to the other. The other thing I was going to say, chat is great, but when I'm doing a demo, I'm painting and I'm talking. And that's a lot of multitasking. I can answer questions, but I can't look at the chat and actually read a question. So if you see questions pop up in the chat, or if you want to just type them in there, just so it's better if you just ask the question to me rather than thinking that I'm actually going to see it in chat, because I'd probably see it tomorrow in chat.
Well, but
okay.
if somebody doesn't feel comfortable talking, then
Yeah,
they can put in the chat. I'll just interrupt you.
awesome. That's
Okay.
fine. That's totally fine. I just wouldn't want anybody to think that I was ignoring them. I'm not that multitaskable. Talking, painting, and answering questions is about the limit. All right, so I'm going to go back to where I was. I have my Prussian blue. Okay, so first thing I have to decide is how much of this painting of this image do I want to actually paint? All right, I'm going to take on the whole thing. We have plenty of time, but as you're working, maybe you don't want to do the whole thing. Maybe you're just interested in what's going on the table, or maybe you're just interested in the flowers. Doing the value study is also a great way to kind of get to know your subject and get to know what it is that is really kind of inspiring you to paint. Okay, so I know that I love these purple tulips. I've done them, we've painted them a couple times already, so I know that I'm definitely inspired by them. And so that's where I'm going to start. Those tulips to me are, something that I definitely know that I'm going to want to include in this composition. So I'm going to start up in the top area, and I'm going to just start getting my big overall shapes blocked in. One of the things that I'm going to focus on is staying connected to my paper. Okay, when you're working, if you want to keep a really nice sort of a fluid feeling, if you can train yourself to keep your brush connected to your paper as much as possible, that's going to go a long way. Now, the brush that I'm using is a Princeton Snap Series pointed round, okay, and it's a number 10 size, okay. It's sort of a nice, I would call it a middle range sort of a brush for working this size. It's really nice because I can get nice big shapes blocked in. Okay, so I started out with that one nice big tulip over there. There's another one that's sort of in this area here, so I'll just start to get that blocked in. Notice as I keep picking up the other blue. Notice as I'm putting this down I'm not drawing an outline, okay? I'm making a shape with my brush, okay? That's the whole idea of drawing with the brush. When you do that, you very, very effectively can capture the gesture of your subject, okay? And gesture is such an important component, especially in watercolor. I think it's important in all media, but in watercolor, if you can make your brush strokes gestural and so that they truly express motion and movement and you know, the overall gesture of whatever your subject happens to be, that is going to impart so much life and just energy into your paintings. So that's why I put so much emphasis on the idea of drawing with your brush. You draw with the whole brush. When I use the tip of the brush, I put down a fine line. When I use the whole brush, I get this beautiful sort of a fluid path that that just makes this really, really nice, expressive sort of a mark on my paper. Lots and lots of backruns and things running into one another. Okay, it's watercolor. It does that. Don't get mad at it for doing that. Okay, let it be watercolor. If you're looking for a tighter look that is that has more control, what you might want to do is consider working either with acrylic. If you don't want to work with oil, acrylic is a nice alternative. You could work with gouache, which is opaque watercolor. That gives you a little bit more control depending on how you use it. But if you're really, you know, if you're really looking for expression, you can absolutely get that with watercolor if you allow the paints to do what they do best, which is just sort of, you know, have a bit of a mind of their own and allow them to sort of interact with the paper and with different parts of your composition, instead of trying to have this really, really limited idea of what your painting should look like. Okay, so I started by getting in some of these tulips. Before putting in a few more of those, I've kind of gotten down to this part of the painting that's going to start hitting the other elements that are on the table. So I'm going to start to block in my vase. Okay, so now for this vase, what I want to do, I want it to connect up. I want everything to be very fluid and to really have a connection throughout this composition. So I'm going to start to get my vase blocked in. Okay, and remember this painting, this is the value study. This is going to, anything that doesn't work out over here, when we go to do it in color, we're going to have experienced it already and we're going to know how to address that. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I want to get my vase placed on the table. Now, what am I doing? Why am I making these elliptical shapes? Okay, I'm constructing that vase from the inside out. Okay, if we were to take that and cut it into slices like a loaf of bread, we get these cross-sectional ellipses that would all be different widths as we move up and down vertically on the vase. Okay, it's wider at the top, it kind of comes in, and then it gets a little wider at the bottom. It's got a little base to it, right? So we want to get those different components in. If you were to draw one side and then draw the other side, I can almost promise you'd never get them equal. They would feel off balance. You know how that struggle goes when you're trying to draw something that's symmetrical. So there's your first little takeaway from this is construct any objects that you've got that are symmetrical, construct them from the inside out. Give yourself those construction lines. Oh, it's watercolor. I'm not going to be able to cover those up. Well, first of all, so what? It's okay if you can see them. I always love to see construction lines in a painting, in a drawing, because to me, that tells me how that gives me a glimpse into how that artist sees things and how they think. Okay, so if I see some of those lines that I put in here that showed me how to make this vase nice and symmetrical, that doesn't bother me one bit. Okay, so I'm going to go onto my shadow side, and I'm going to start. I'm going to thin this paint down a little bit. I don't want it to be totally washed out, but it's a white object, so my shadow on this doesn't have to be quite as dark as it is on the things that are inside the leaves or the dark purple tulips, the stuff that's actually inside the vase. Okay, so we'll just start to get a hint of the shadows. Shadows are mostly on the right side, the light's coming at it this way. That's a really good thing to take note of early on in your painting process, okay? Know which direction your light is coming from. It's really easy to tell. You're just gonna look at whatever subject matter it happens to be, squint at it and say, okay, which side is darker and which side is lighter? Always have that question in your head. Is it darker or is it lighter? Because that will tell you so much about, you know, your values, the relationship of those values. It will make sense out of everything that's on there. Look, we all of a sudden, this vase is starting to look like, oh, it's got some form to it. It's actually a three-dimensional object. It's not just this flat thing floating on the paper. Okay, so we look up in here. Up in the top there, there's a little bit of some of that shadow. Okay, so we're going to put some of that in there. And we're even going to suggest a teeny tiny bit of some of that acanthus leaf pattern that's on this little white china vase. Okay, and then as we move to the left, that's the other thing, don't get distracted by surface texture and detail. Okay, in the shadow side we see hardly any of it, and we can add in a teeny tiny bit of some suggestions of what's going on with that pattern there, but we really, if you squint at it, you don't really see that much of it. On the left side, we're going to lighten up the shadow colors a little bit, because remember, that's the light side. That's where the light's coming from. It's going to be a little bit lighter. So because it's lighter, we will see a little bit of that pattern, but we're still not going to put a lot of emphasis on that. The emphasis should always be on the object as a whole, and in making it look like it has volume, like it's three-dimensional, like it goes from light to dark in a very sort of gradual process, right? That's called turning the form, making it look like it goes around as opposed to just being flat. And in order to get that to happen, you really do have to pay a lot of attention to those value changes. So we're going to even just make this right side, very, very right side, all the way at the right, just a little darker as it moves that way. So to do that, I'm just putting just a slightly darker glaze of this Prussian blue on here. Okay, underneath it, right? Because it's sort of casting a shadow underneath this little base thing here. That's got quite a bit of shadow underneath it. So we're going to put a little bit of that in, and then that's going to help it to lift up off the table a little bit more. Okay, now think about this for a second. All right, I'm doing this. I'm doing all of this just using one color. I'm talking while I'm doing it, and I'm doing all these different value patterns here. Imagine what it's going to be like when we have to look at all these values and all these different forms, these different shapes, and how they interact with one another. And yet on top of that, we've got to mix color. That's a lot to do all at once. That's why if you do this first, especially if you're just really new to watercolor or new to working this way, where we start introducing darks earlier on and where you're not actually drawing with a pencil first, if you take the time and put in the effort to do this as a value study first, just in the one color. When you go to do it in the limited palette, like we're going to do a little bit later on, you'll be much more familiar with what your subject, what the forms look like. You'll be much more familiar with the value relationships. You'll have a map. That's really what this little value study turns into. You'll have a map right next to you that you can refer to that tells you, oh yeah, this is the dark side. It's really dark in here. It's much lighter on this side. You'll have so much information that you can refer to. And it's almost like your hand sort of gets used to the forms. As you start to make the tulips, you get really familiar with that cup shape, that sort of rounded, they're almost like little eggs or something that are at the end of the stems. And it really is just a very good practice and good habit to get into, is to doing these little value studies. Okay, now one thing about flowers that you will notice if you paint them a lot. I love to paint flowers. I do a lot of flower painting, especially this time of year, now that everything's starting to come out. Flowers are very, very easy in terms of if you need to move something compositionally to make it stronger. Flowers are not going to complain. They're not going to give you a hard time. They're going to be very, very forgiving in terms of you don't have to put them in the exact same spot that you see them in your photo, or if you're working from life, like I always recommend, from something that's right in front of you. Okay, you can be very, very expressive, take a lot of artistic license in the places that you position them. What you want to do is you want to place them in a way that you'll get the best compositional arrangement that you can possibly get. Right now, we're working from a photo, so that's kind of pre-composed. But if you're working from life, and you have to decide, well, what do I want to include? What do I want to leave out? This is particularly true if you work outside, if you paint outside a lot like I do, and you're in a busy place like on Pearl Street, and there's a ton of activity going on around you. There's so much, there's only so much that you can include and actually have it make sense. You should always work for simplifying and editing anything out that is just sort of extraneous or distracting in your composition. Okay, so this is a good way to practice some of that. Okay, so what am I doing now? I am going back in and I'm putting in some slightly darker values in the places where I feel like it really needs a little bit of some darker, deeper tones of blue. Okay, watercolor, as you probably know if you've worked with it a lot, has a tendency to dry a little bit lighter. Okay, so sometimes you've got to go back in and hit your darks, because if you don't get dark enough, you won't get that nice depth and dimension that you want your painting to have. Okay, so we've got our main player in here. So let's put in some of these other elements and put in some background. Okay, so I'm going to start and get a little bit of a suggestion of this orange that's in the background here. So that's just a nice circular sort of a little globe there. Just fix that edge. See, I slopped it up. Doesn't matter. I'm not worried about it. It's just a piece of paper, number one, but also watercolor. If you just pick it up a little bit, I have this habit, I do it with my hands. I just sort of, because I can tell then how much water I have in the brush, I just sort of blot it up a little bit. This is going to turn out to be, this is all going to be in shadow anyway. So it doesn't matter. I don't want to get that little bit of the, there's a nice little pear over there that's got some nice shadows on it. So we'll start to block a little bit of that in. I also really love focusing on negative shapes. Okay, so that pear, in order to make it really feel like it's sitting there, I've got to have some of the shadow that's behind it. I've got to have the shadow that is underneath it, because that shadow is really going to make it feel like it's actually sitting on the surface of that table. It's going to give it some definition on the bottom edge of it. It's going to really make it feel like it's grounded. Same thing on the bottom of this orange. We got to get that in there, get it to have a little bit of shadow behind it. Okay, we've got a little bit of a lemon over here. We'll put that in a minute. Backgrounds are also really pretty important. I'm just going to do this because I can do it faster. I just grabbed a number 18 pointed round. If you don't have this, you can absolutely do it with your number 10. I just want to move a little faster. What I want to do is what some people might think of as, oh my gosh, this is going to be scary. And it is a little bit, is I want to get a little bit of some of that nice shadow that we see in the background there, because that shadow is going to help connect up the objects on the table to the vase there. It's also going to make it apparent that that's our shadow side, that the vase and the flowers are casting a nice shadow on that background cloth. Okay, so we want to get that sort of feeling in there. We can get a little bit of it to even just sort of carry through and take us right over to this other side and just put that hint of the fabric fold that sort of goes in there. Your shadows are a great device for unifying your composition. Okay, so always make sure that you don't ignore your nice shadow shapes. Okay, there we go. So I just want to get a little darker underneath some of that fruit. See how painterly and loose that gets? Okay, don't have any qualms about just putting it down. Like I said, it's just a piece of paper. It's your value study. It's the practice one anyway, so it's not even a big deal at all if it doesn't go exactly the way that you want it. Take the word exactly out of your vocabulary when you're painting. You know, you want it to be good. You want it to be expressive and to make the most of the watercolor. Watercolor, to me anyway, is not an exacting sort of a medium. To me, instead, it's much more about the expression, and it's about accurate sort of overall elements. Okay, your composition is important, your drawings, your proportion, your value relationships are the most important thing. You get that right, you're going to get a nice painting, even if it's got water splats and all kind of other things all happening around it. And mine have that all the time. Everybody gets all worried about blossoms and or blooms. I never even say that right. The things that when the water does that back running kind of thing. I love that. I saw a John Singer Sargent exhibition. It was this wonderful display of Sargent's watercolors, Homer watercolors, and then all these other ones that were from like the 1700s on or so. It was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art a few years ago, and I was teaching a workshop that year, and I took my workshop attendees to it. It was the most amazing workshop, and I actually just loved seeing Sargent is one of my favorite painters. I just love seeing his work and seeing the watercolors and actually seeing they had some really good interactive exhibits that talked about how he mixed colors and everything. And there was even this one painting, I don't even remember which one it was. It might have been the one that has the white tent in it, which is a real favorite of mine. And lo and behold, in one little area, there was like a little bit of one of those blossom or bloom things. And I was like, see, I told you, it doesn't matter. It's watercolor. It's okay if Sargent can have that in there. I certainly am not going to complain if it's in mine. But it just really carries across that that expressiveness and that quality that I think is so unique to watercolor. All right, so let me just soften that shadow a little teeny tiny bit. That lemon can just sort of float back there, disappear. I don't feel the real need to put any patterning on this cloth. I'd say this composition is busy enough as it is. So for my monochrome, I would call this just about done. Maybe put in a little bit of some transitional suggestions of folds or something here, okay? Just to kind of get that value range to be nice and fluid and have some nice continuity. But as a value study, I'd say this is about where you would want to stop, because stopping, knowing when to stop, is another thing that I think is really important. Once any medium, I don't care if it's oils, watercolor, pastel, whatever, once you overwork a painting, there's no bringing it back. It just starts to get not as refreshing, not as lively. It can start to get just an overworked sort of a look. So to avoid that, I generally advise stopping sooner rather than later. Once your painting says what you want it to say, don't worry about the little leaf that's way back here that you forgot to put in, because honestly, it doesn't matter. It's the more fussy it gets, the less interesting it's going to be to look at. Okay, slop a little bit of dirty water back in there, but that's how I would handle this monochromatically. I'll do the next one in color, but I want to take a break and just see if anybody has questions. If you guys want to work on one a little bit and try this technique with the one color, ask me questions as you go. I'm good with that. If you guys want me to do something else, Ed, I'll rely on you to just tell me, no, we're going to do something else.
I've been working on mine as you were doing yours. So.
Okay, good, great. Do you want to share it?
Yeah. So let
me.
Let's see. Let's see if I can.
So you're going to take me off spotlight or add yourself to the spotlight.
Let's see.
There we go. Oh, you're working teeny tiny.
Yeah, it's an artist.
Wow.
It's an artist trading card, so it's like 2.5 inches by 3.
Like a business card size. Oh, that's really cool. That looks nice. You packed a lot of information into a little space. Oh, just so people get an idea, the size of this is 7 by 10 pad. So it's considerably bigger than what you did. So as I said, you really got a lot of information into that little space. That looks great.
Well, and now that I'm seeing it on the camera, I realize I need to go darker.
Exactly. That will really pop it. But and it probably looks dark enough. Watercolor, as you know, does that thing where it dries and then it's like, wait a minute, that was dark a minute ago and now it's not. Right. So yeah. Oh, great. That's okay. Really nice.
So anybody else want to share what they did, or have you done?
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
It seems like when I try to do it, everything's coming out the same tone mostly.
Okay. Okay.
What am I doing wrong?
Let's see what you've got, and I'll take a guess at what might be.
Don't laugh.
I would never. Okay. All right. So it's when you hold it up, it's going to run, and it's doing that. Now, what you've got there, which you've got from what I saw, you've got a nice middle range of values throughout. Okay. So what I would do with something like that is I would let that dry. And then I would go back in when it's completely dry, use more paint and less water and hit your dark values, okay? It's perfectly fine to have the whole thing sort of be almost like, silkscreen is not the right word, but just like a large shape, just a form of where like all the greenery is gonna go or where all the tulips are gonna go. As long as that's in sort of a middle or even if it's a light range, what you then can do is go back in and hit those darks. You probably just weren't varying the amount of paint as much as I did. I got it in one shot. You're just going to go back and do it in two. That's all. It's perfectly fine.
So, Anne, I think we'll go to Annie Thayer. I think you were holding yours up. Annie,
okay.
Show yours.
Okay. Oh, very nice. You've really got a nice sense of the light hitting it from the one side there. I love that. And I actually, I like that you shortened the vase. You fit it all in there and it looks like it doesn't, I mean, I know what it looks like, but if I didn't know what it looked like, it looks nice and round. It transitions from the light side into the darker side. You've got nice darks on the tulips. I would hit a few spots, like in the part where it goes right into the jar there, I would get a little darker in there. What I love about all the ones that I've seen so far, nobody ended up with the lollipop tulips that we've all had before. You've got to, as long as you capture that nice sense of all the foliage being nice and full in the central area, like you have, like Ed did, like the gentleman I just saw who was having trouble with the variation of values. You've got that, and that is such an important place to start with it. So nice work. What did you think of working this way?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, it was really fun, just not even starting with a drawing. And,
Yeah, well, you are drawing. That's the thing. Yeah, everybody has to, everybody thinks, oh, if it's not a pencil, it's not a drawing. It is a drawing. And it's funny because I believe drawing is like, if you can draw, you can do anything. But that doesn't mean that you have to draw with pencil. I draw with charcoal, I draw with pastel, I do pen and ink. I think one of the reasons I don't use pencil is because pencil is so thin, and it's hard to get a big block in when you're working with such a fine pointed implement. So everybody's different, but that's just the way that I look at it.
So, Anne, I think maybe we'll go to Robley next.
Okay.
Robley, I think you were showing some work.
Yes, let's see what you've got there. Okay, that is what I love about yours is you have really, really simplified the forms, and that is so important with drawing. When I talk about form, I always tell my students in my online classes, don't give whatever you're painting a name. Don't think of it as a tulip. Don't think of it as a glass. Don't think of it as what it is. Just make the shape that you see, and you've done that, and that is really effective. You end up with actually a more accurate representation of what it looks like than if you drew what you think a tulip looks like. So I think that's
when I look
great.
at it backwards in the on the screen.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like what I see. It looks
Well,
terribly
here's what you need to do.
asymmetric.
If
That's
you
fun.
get a little bit more of the, and I know I'm going to point to the wrong side because when I look at it, I don't know what I'm seeing versus what's in front of you. But on that one side, if you can get a little bit more, throw a leaf or something that's coming out. Exactly. You've got it. That's what I was saying about the flowers before, is if you end up with a composition that doesn't look balanced to you, flowers aren't going to care if you throw a few extra ones in on wherever you need them. A building on a street that's got 1 point perspective, that might look a little strange if you start adding some stuff in, but in something like this, go for it. But nice work. You've got a great transition from dark to light.
I don't see that picture on the screen. Does anybody else see it?
I was highlighting his video, so I'm sorry if you weren't seeing it. Sorry about that. Was anybody else having trouble seeing him? So next we're going to go to Kiri. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't have headphones on, so it might echo pretty bad in here, but I tried one and I got my scale really off, so I did a second.
Now, this is odd. I see you, and then I see your painting.
Yeah, I have two cameras. I teach art as well. So
Okay, yeah.
Two cameras.
Okay, if you could hold yours to I can only see the one that's on the right-hand side, which looks great, by the way. I do love, there we go, perfect. Okay, I really like the darks that you got in the one on the right-hand page. That really, really makes that pop. Now, if you were to go into the one on the left, which the vase got a little smaller, that's okay. But if you wanted to throw a little bit of some of those darks in there, like you did on the one on the right, that would also make it pop a little bit more. Now,
Yeah.
you've painted with watercolor before. It looks like you really have some good control over the transitions and the values and everything. That looks good. I would just keep doing some of those monochromes, and you'd be surprised at how much. When I first decided that I was going to go back into using watercolor, I used oils and pastel for a really long time, and someone with the art center where I used to teach was like, "We really need somebody to do watercolor. Can you teach watercolor?" I was like, "God, I haven't used it in so long. You know, maybe like if you can give me like 6 months to get decent at it again." And what I did was I just kept doing monochromatic studies, and you get so much, you improve a lot faster when you're not throwing the color mixing at yourself too. So even if you do it simultaneously, like we're going to do today, like we did this little monochrome and then we'll do the full color one, it just helps a lot. And you also get to, as I said, get like a practice one in where you can work out your composition, anything that's off balance, so you fix it in the color one. Plus, these are also, I just think they're really, really pretty. I love looking at monochromatic work, and you know, I think they're just little works of art in and of themselves, even though they're just in the one color.
So, Anne, it looks like we have a couple more folks who want to share. So there's Barb Olson, then we'll go to Sherry, and
Okay.
I think I see Nancy working on something. But
Okay, so I would say probably, and I'll talk to you in just a second. I would say probably if we spent maybe another 10 to 15 minutes on sharing, that would be fine. But I think I would want probably 45 minutes or so to do my color one, if that's okay.
Okay, all right.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's see what you got there.
Yeah, so I have to tell you all, I am not a watercolor artist. So
okay,
I work in fabric,
but
I love to try new things. So here we go.
That's wonderful. And I really like, you've got a really good range of values. You've got the white of your paper. You've got that nice pale wash that you've got on there on the shadows and on the light side of the vase. Then you transition into your middle values, and then you've got those nice darks. If you were to take just a little bit more dark in some of these areas, like in between some of the leaves, that will give that a little more depth. And you can also darken up a little bit on your shadows that are underneath the objects. The darkest part of a shadow is always where it meets up with the object that's casting the shadow. But that looks nice. And I'm glad that you jumped right in with the watercolor. Now tell me a little bit about your fabric art. What do you do? Do you do quilting, or do you do
I paint and dye fabric, sometimes in patterns, other times it's just however it turns out.
Oh, wow.
But then I cut it all up and make a composition, layer it, and then I stitch through it. So that then makes it qualify as.
That sounds wonderful. You know what might be a fun thing for you to use the watercolor is when you're working out your design ideas, to just do some little thumbnail studies for the ones that you want to have be a little bit more planned out ahead of time. Because I know you said some of them, you just let them turn out how they turn out, which is always a wonderful way to work. But I could see, I love painting fabric. In fact, Ed, you have a beautiful study that I'm assuming is yours right behind you of a gray piece of fabric. Fabric is one of my favorite things to paint. So I noticed that.
Yeah, it's a
really
painting of
nice.
fabric. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's
Thank you.
really beautiful.
So thank you.
So we'll go to Sherry now, and then.
Oh, look at that. That is gorgeous. I absolutely love the runniness and your marks that you made. Did you paint that with ultramarine? It looks like ultramarine to me on the camera.
Sherry, you're on mute.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. I didn't have another color, so.
It's beautiful. I love ultramarine. I tried to make it limited just so that people wouldn't have to go out and buy colors that they didn't have. That looks lovely. I used to have, we don't have it anymore. I used to have it was called a hot chocolate pot, and I think it belonged to my mother-in-law, and it had these roses on the actual ceramic. It reminds me of, your painting reminds me of that. It's absolutely lovely. The feeling of that that ceramic vase or china vase is so delicate. It really comes through. And even though you've got very, very soft, loose edges, I can see the forms very clearly, and it really does have a nice sense of depth. Beautiful work. Are you happy with it?
Yeah.
You should
Thank
be.
you.
It's beautiful. Lovely.
Okay, thank
Thanks
you.
for sharing it with us.
Okay, we're gonna go next to Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi. That looks really nice. I love, you know what I love seeing about these? They're all, they all are, it's obvious that you're all getting the point and you've given it a try and it's working for you. But I love the fact that all of them have such a different look and feel to them. Yours really has, it has almost an oil painterly quality to it, where I love very loose impressionistic oil paintings where you see a flower, but instead of seeing all these little tiny petals, you really see the sculptural form of that. That comes across so clearly in yours. I also really love your background wash. It's obvious that you put it in confidently, that you were just using that shadow as a way to pop the other elements forward. I think that looks great. Your darks are dark enough. You preserve the white of the paper. What did you think of working this way? Is this something that you've done before? You've done?
Very little.
Okay.
But I love doing it.
Okay. It looks
Yeah,
great.
but Nancy is an incredible watercolor artist.
I believe it. And I can kind of see some of her paintings in the background, I think, and they look great. So good. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think that's everybody, unless I missed someone. Raise your hand or speak up. Oh, Melody, just a second.
Okay. Hi, Melody. Oh, you've got to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. Oh, that is pretty. Now, are you working on drawing paper? It looks like you got a little bit of
Pretty bit warped. I got a little bit
of carried
overexcited
with the water. That's okay. It adds a nice fluid feeling to it, but you probably want to work on a little bit of a heavier sheet.
Actually, it is pretty heavy. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay.
But,
that happens. You know what I use a lot of the time when I go outside? Oh, where the heck is it? Here it is. And now you don't have to get it in the arch because, I mean, obviously this is the really expensive stuff, but there's a couple other, Dick Blick makes a block, Fluid. There's one called Fluid. That's really nice. If you have trouble with it buckling sometimes, if you work on a watercolor block, that helps. You can use as much water as you want when you do that. I thought that what you had, though, I thought it had some really nice variation in the values. I think,
paper.
Let's see. Whoops, we have to put Melody back up there.
Yep.
Let's see.
Yeah, there we are. Okay.
What kind is it, Melody?
It's this nature sketch journal. It is
okay.
Oh, so it's not watercolor, it's
it's drawing paper. Yeah, it's
I do use it with some wet stuff a little bit.
Yeah. If you want to avoid that, just get 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. It's got a little bit of texture in it. That's what this is. It'll just give you a little bit more oomph to the paper, so it won't buckle on you. But you had a nice range of values. You preserved some white of the paper. That splash of water that you put in there is wonderful. I just would love to see that on a sheet that can stand up to it. But very, very nice work. It definitely captured the feeling of the tulips, and you got the values, the value relationships working for you. So nice job.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for everybody for sharing your work. I think maybe we should move on.
Okay.
And I just wanted to note, if anybody wants to share your work on Instagram and tag the Boulder Art Association, we'd love to see your art there. And help us to promote our events as well. And you can also tag Anne on Instagram as well. I think you're
Yeah, it's just my
Kullaf,
last name.
right?
Yep,
Kullaf?
Kullaf. Yeah, that would be great. I would love to see it, and I'll follow you if you're, you know, if I see that you tag me, I'll follow you back and everything. You'll pick up some extra follows there. Okay, so I guess we are ready to move into part B, which is actually painting these in the colors that they're actually in. So let me just move my stuff around a little here so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, as I said, that's sometimes the most challenging part. So I'm back with my number 10 pointed round. Again, this is Princeton Snap Series. These are inexpensive synthetic brushes. I discovered them in the Blick store when I was living in Philly. I just, because I've used the Princeton brushes before, but not this particular one. These are, I have the sable ones, but these are just synthetic. And what I like about them is they have a lot of spring to them. They seem to hold up really well. They don't get like a lot of those little hairs that come off of them. And they're just, you know, they're just a really, really nice brush for watercolor. And as I said, they're not expensive at all. Okay, so what am I doing here? What am I mixing? I am making a mess, but besides making a mess, I'm making some of the purple that I want to use on the tulips. Okay, I'm going to start in the same place that I did with my monochrome. Now, I'm using alizarin crimson and some Prussian blue. I might even have a little bit of Winsor blue mixed in with that, just because I don't remember what I put out earlier. But it's, again, it's that more greenish sort of a blue. You could use ultramarine to do this. I'm just trying to limit the palette. If you use ultramarine, it might have a little bit more color saturation. And in terms of the paint ratio of one color to another, I'm definitely leaning a little bit more towards the reds, because I want to warm them up. It's not going to be an exact match to that. I promise you it's not going to be an exact match to that. It doesn't matter. When you work with a limited palette, your goal is less about color matching and a recipe and more about color harmony and having all your colors work together and play nicely in the sandbox, so that there's not any clashes, there's not any mud, you know, not any conflict. So that's generally the goal when you're using that limited palette. So I'm going to start the same way as I did before. I'm going to start with that nice big tulip. I was pretty happy with my composition and everything, the way it fell out on the page. So I'm going to go with that. If you're not happy with what you got and you want to make any adjustments, now you've got your monochrome piece that you can refer to in order to do that. Okay. Now what I'm doing is, sometimes if I feel like I put a little too much water in, I just lift a little bit of it out. And that helps me to get that range of values to start up, even while this is still wet. So the gentleman that I spoke with that was having a little bit of difficulty with everything kind of looking like it was the same value, that's a technique that you can use. You can use a paper towel. I use my hand. The reason I use my hand is because then I can tell how wet or how much water is left in the brush. If you're neater than I am, then you can use a paper towel, and you just pull up a little bit of that. And then that gives you a nice, like soft transition over into the, from the light into the dark. Okay, and we can definitely strengthen that dark later on. Okay, so I'm working basically now with, let's call this a middle dark value for the purple of the tulips. Okay, I know I want to have those in there, so that is a good starting point for me. I always start with the part of my composition that is kind of the most important to me, and I try to get my first element or object or whatever you want to call it, I try to get my first element placed in the position I want it and in the size I want it. And everything else sort of is going to use that as a benchmark in terms of its placement, in terms of its size, location, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's this one in the dark. I apologize for the glare. Let's see if I can adjust it. Well, it'll dry and you won't have that problem. One of the challenges of getting everything to do what you want it to. So you can see my tulips, the color of them, it's not as pinkish as what's there. If you wanted them to have a more saturated look to them, you could use a different red. Okay, I'm using alizarin combined with the Prussian blue because I want to keep that nice limited number range of colors, limited palette. You could substitute the alizarin with a permanent rose or with a magenta. Okay, that's up to you. I personally, this is where it becomes sort of a matter of preference. I happen to like a more earthy, organic look to my flowers. I don't like them to look too sweet and too pink or too purple. To me, that then sort of takes over and gives my painting a different sort of a feel than what I want it to have. I'd like it to have a little bit more of a strength to it, or just sort of a boldness or a vibrancy. And sometimes, as I said, pinks and purples, they can just get a little too sweet for me. But that's not to say that that's the wrong way to do it. If you prefer to have a more floral garden sort of a look to your flowers, use a different red. Use something that's got a little bit more of that pinkish tone in it. A magenta would be fine. A permanent rose. I'm sure there's other colors that I'm not thinking of because I always mix my purples and I don't use those sort of colors. But you understand the point of what I'm saying. Color is extremely, extremely subjective. I personally like it to be a little more subdued, a little bit more organic. I like to focus on values. I like to have a lot of depth and a lot of dimension. Okay, so now I'm going to shift gears. I've got my tulips placed. I'm going to go in with my greens next. So first I need to mix up some of the more subdued, darker value greens, because I really want to get that. I want to get some of that those shadows placed. I really want to start making my connections in there with my composition, get things to start feeling a little bit more fluid, because we've got, all these tulips that are very, very spaced out. When you're just working in one color, it's easy because you don't have to stop and mix that color in order to continue your drawing, right? So it's a little bit of a challenge. That's the other thing. That's why it's nice to have done it in the monochrome, because you really do get that nice gestural feel for it, so that when you go back to do it this way, your hand sort of remembers what that felt like to get those nice fluid strokes in there. Remember to stay connected to your paper as much as possible. Okay, so there's that top ellipse for the upper piece of the jar, and then there's that little bit of it that sort of goes over. I'm going to just focus on, for now, this right-hand side of the composition a little. I'm going to take a little of my slightly brighter yellow, that Winsor yellow or Azo yellow, whichever one you have, and I'm going to introduce that into the mix that I had made before, just to start warming it up, lightening it up a little tiny bit as I start to block in these leaves. Now, again, the leaves, try to remember to make them with your entire brush if you can, okay? Because when you do that, they end up being a lot more fluid and gestural, and they just take on a much more expressive sort of a look. Okay, so rather than thinking, wait, am I working on this leaf or am I working on that leaf? Where am I at? Everybody always says when they work on leaves or on flowers, at least I hear this a lot, I get lost. It's just like working on fabric, my other favorite subject. When you work with folds and things like that, you can't worry too much about the little creases and things. Squint at it, make the shadow shape. Don't ask yourself, which leaf am I painting? Just make the shape that you see and trust your eye. Learn to trust your eye. That will go such a long way in helping you to become a lot more expressive and a lot more, just a lot more confident in the way that you put the paint down. Okay, those greens are really, really wet. I'm gonna let them dry before I go in and start lightening them up and putting in some of those lighter values. I can show you what it's gonna look like just because it's kind of nice to start seeing those lights come in. But if I wait, if I'm patient, and I'm not patient, I have like the shortest attention span ever. I mean, you can hear it and how fast I talk and everything, but it's hard for me to wait to go in and do something. But with watercolor, you gotta wait till it's dry if you don't want it to run. And there's parts of this that I don't want to run. So I'm gonna let that dry. While it's drying, I'm gonna move down. I'm gonna go work with that vase. Now, what color am I gonna make those shadows? I love the idea of having it connect up with the purple of the tulips. So I'm gonna start there. I'm gonna put it, I wanna make it a little cooler though. So I'm going to drag some of my Prussian blue into it, and I'm going to make it more of a bluish purple to start out with. And then for good measure, just so it doesn't become too color saturated, because I get a little bit nervous when colors look too saturated to me, I'm going to throw a little tiny bit of some raw sienna into that. Excuse me. And that is going to give me a really nice sort of a purpley gray. Okay, and I'm going to use that as the color for the vase. Okay, I'm going to save a little bit of some of that light that we see up on the edges of it there. When I bring these greens down, I'll leave a little bit of some highlights there. I'm going to give myself that center line like I did the last time. Just lighten this up ever so slightly. I'm going to give myself that nice center line. I'm going to put in the base of it, right? That nice ellipse that's down there, that's going to be wider. It's going to come in a little bit over in here. Okay, and if you make the full thing, it's almost like handwriting exercises, making those ellipses. Once you master that, your hand never forgets it, and it just really becomes a nice way to draw. And then we can just sort of connect these up. I'm going to keep this left side really nice and light, because that's the lighter side, remember? And we're just going to connect that right to the bottom there, and the same thing on this side. It's amazing how, even if it's not exact, it will look more exact when you do it this way than if you draw one side and then try to draw the other. Make those ellipses. It will help so much. Okay, now let's get a little bit, I'm going to get even a little tiny bit more, get a little bit more blue into my shadow color here. There, that I like that. I love blue. Blue's like my favorite color. So this is our shadow side. We remember we figured that out when we did our value study. So we're going to just keep those nice dark shadow sides, shadow values. We start to get those blocked in. We can start to hint at where it starts to go into the lighter side over there. Okay, I'm going to carry that right across so that we don't really have like a big line right in the middle. And then we've got that nice bit of it that comes down, and then it sort of goes off into this side and continues to just make that nice dark shadow side on the right there. It's on my right anyway. Okay, so I'm going to get a little bit more of some of this paint, and then I can start suggesting a hint at some of the patterning that we see more of on the right hand side. Not too much. Remember, you want to make this about the form, not so much about the surface texture. You can hint at surface texture, but don't drive yourself crazy with it, because it will come back to haunt you by flattening all that hard work that you did to make everything look nice and rounded. It will come back and it will flatten stuff out, and then you'll be like, why did I do that? Why didn't I just leave it alone? So don't be tempted to overdo it on the surface texture. Okay, so we're gonna scoot over to the left side there where we've got light, but we've got a little bit of shadow that suggests some of that patterning, and we can suggest a little bit of it. When we get into this inner part here, we're gonna have more greens in there, so don't worry, it's not gonna look like a big giant mistake gap in there. All right, see how that looks too dark? I'm gonna just lift up a little bit of that with my brush. So now it gets nice and light and just sort of barely there in terms of its suggestion of that pattern. Okay, we just want to put enough to just show what the contours are on this side, right? We can even just like get a little bit of that nice sort of purplish gray tone in there, and then we can go back and darken up like I did on the other one. Just darken up the right side a little bit more so that it has that idea. It has to look like it goes from light to dark. That's way more important than seeing all those little white on white shadows that we have in there. Okay, now we're going to go into the background a little bit. I'm going to use the same nice color that I used on my vase there. I'm going to use that for my background shadows. Okay, you don't have to make every every part of this doesn't have to be another color. The more unity that you have and the more overlap with colors, the more unified and the more continuity you're going to end up with. Okay, so that's a big positive. We want to have that. I love that really dark neutral that I just made. I want to throw a little bit of that into that section up there, because what that's going to do is that's going to give it a little bit more depth. Okay, right over in here where we have these fabric folds, I'm going to start to get that blocked in, just because I have this nice color mixed up, and I want to start hinting at the idea of the vase being a little bit lighter than the background in that section. On this side, we have the vase as darker than the background. So we'll shift gears a little when we get over there. Thin that down a little, throw a little bit more water in there, and just start to make a little bit of some of those mild suggestions of fabric and folds and whatever else it is that we have back in that section there. Okay, now I'm going to just fade that out a little tiny bit more. I'm going to go right over to the other side. This has some more dark in it, and then we kind of come back into here. This is almost the same value as the side edge of that jar. It's a little bit different. And then we can just sort of start getting some of that shadow in. We can use the shadow to actually sort of carve in an idea of where that orange is going to go. Get a little bit more of this right in this right-hand side here. All of this fabric on this side has quite a bit of shadow. It's all cast by those flowers. Okay, I'm going back to my big brush just so I can do this quicker because I don't want to run out of time. Okay, so I'm going to use some more of this nice purpley gray blue color. I just happened to have a little bit more blue on the brush there, so it sort of picked that up. Get a little bit of that up into there. See how loosely I just sort of plopped that in, okay? Get it to continue a little bit. Don't worry, we're going to put some more greens down on those leaves, so it's not going to look like the lollipop flowers. We don't want that. That will all fill in there. You just want to get a slightly less contrast on there so that fold doesn't take over. And so that starts to connect us up and give us some background to look at. Okay, we can even put in a suggestion of where the shadow of the lemon is going to be, and then we'll put the lemon in later if we want to. And we can do the same thing with that pear. So by making the shadow shape first, I'm actually just sort of making a placeholder for some of these fruits and other things that are going to be on the table. That's just another way to approach it. I often work with negative shapes. I love negative shapes, and I love the interaction that that creates with the white of the paper, because to me, that's such a big plus with watercolor, is you get to get such a beautiful integration with your surface, with your support, whatever it happens to be, whether it's board or whether it's paper, or whatever you happen to be painting on. It plays such an integral role in the painting with watercolor. That's what I really am drawn to. Okay, so now I am taking some more of my Winsor yellow, and I'm introducing that into the mix that I had before of the Prussian blue and the raw sienna. You could also just take the Winsor yellow and the Prussian blue by themselves and just put the two of those together. That'll make it a little tiny bit more electric. Maybe we'll do that on some of those leaves that are a little bit more backlit, but I want to get a little bit of some of this right up to that edge there, so that the leaves start to have a little bit more connection to the jar down there. Okay, so let's take some of that yellow, put it over here. We'll take some of the blue. See how much brighter it gets when I don't have the raw sienna in it. That's because raw sienna is more of a golden yellow, and so it has some red in it. So red and green being opposite one another on the color wheel, they just neutralize each other a little bit more. Whereas the Winsor yellow, or the Azo yellow, whichever one you're using, and the Prussian blue together, it's like, it's just making a greenish blue lighter and brighter by adding in that really, really nice, bright, bold yellow. So some places you want that, other places you might want it to be a little bit quieter. So that's why I like to use the combination. Okay, this glare is going to drive us all crazy. So I need to let this dry again. I'll go back into this. The thing I like to do is I like to create the suggestion of the forms, and then I like to go back into them when they're dry, and then really, really carve out some nice shadows that then go in and define the forms even more. Okay, I know there's tons of glare on this. Let me hold that way. Now you can see it a little bit better. I will absolutely go in and define some more leaves when that's dry. While we're waiting, we've got fruit to do. Okay, so let's get the pear, which is green, so we can use the greens that we have mixed up. Always use colors that you've already got mixed up whenever you can, because first of all, it sort of saves you time. It uses the paint efficiently, but it also makes it ensures that your painting is going to have areas that relate to one another. So whatever I do on the table, if I'm using the same colors that I used up in the top there, it's going to feel very, very cohesive. Okay, I must have said that word a million times during this demo today, but it's really, really important compositionally that your work feel like it's unified. And that's a really good way to do it, is through using repeating colors throughout the composition. Okay, we'll add a little bit more some nice darks and just sort of get that stem coming out of there. That's got a nice feel to it. And then we've got, let's take some of our red and some of the bright, bright yellow, because we need to make an orangey tone. So I'm going to use some of my Winsor yellow with a little bit of that alizarin. If you really, really want it to be super orange, you could use some of the other red, some of the Winsor red. But if you don't have it, just make it with this. It's fine. Okay, there we go. So it's got the lighter, more yellowy tones up at the top. We'll throw in a little more alizarin towards the bottom where it's in shadow. There we go. And so that gives it a little bit of a nice rounded feel. We'll go back in with a little more shadow underneath this when it's dry. That's the other thing. Objects can run into one another and not be hard edged and have a little bit of that bleeding quality that I was mentioning before that I happen to like. If you do that, it keeps the emphasis on the main areas that you really want to focus on. Okay, so we've got this nice little lemon over here. We'll just sort of put that in. I just used some of the Winsor yellow. Might have had a little bit of alizarin on my brush left over from before. That's the overall shape of it, right? Just looks like a big blob. And then on the bottom, let's take a little of the color we used on the orange and throw a tiny bit, just a tiny bit of some blue into it. That was too much. Just to kind of make it like a purplish tone. The reason I want to use purple on the side of the lemon, it's not going to be a really pretty purple, it's going to be more of a brownish sort of a tone, is purple and yellow being opposites on the color wheel. If I put that color onto the body of the lemon where the lemon is in shadow, that's going to make it have a believable shade of subdued yellow to make the lemon look like it's got light hitting it from one side. Okay, and you can even lift off a little up at the top if you want it to feel a little bit lighter up there. Okay, so what does this need to pull it together? It needs darks. Okay, so what we're going to do in two places, we're going to get some of that Prussian blue and some of that alizarin together. Whoops. Prussian blue, by the way, is like super, super powerful. So a little goes a long way. And I'm going to keep it a little bit on the cooler side because this is for the shadows. I am going to put a little bit of my raw sienna in it just to make it a bit less purple. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more alizarin, not too much. There we go. Okay, what I want to do, I'm mostly concerned with the values. I'm not as concerned with the color because I'm at this stage, I'm not introducing any new colors into it. It's going to be harmonious with what I've got there. What I want to do is I want to connect these shadows a little bit better. I want to ground the fruit. So in order to do that, the shadow shapes underneath, they need to be a little darker. Okay, remember what I was saying before about how where it meets up with the object, that's the darkest part of any shadow. So let's get darker, right? Especially as we get close to these objects. By the way, all of this is really wet. So yeah, it's going to run a little bit, but that's okay because that will give me more of that nice sort of loose transitioning feel that I happen to like. Okay, if you don't like that look, wait till it dries, right? You've got choices. You don't have to do it the same way. There we go. So then that's cleaned up a little. That looks like, oh yeah, she put a little bit of fruit in there. And it's like I gave it, didn't really think about it too much, but just wanted a hint of it, a suggestion of it. That's always a good way to think of like your secondary elements in a painting. You want them to be there. You want them to be recognizable. You want people to know what they are, but you don't want them to become so tightly described that they distract in any way from your primary subject, whatever that happens to be, which I think in this case is definitely the flowers and the vase and all that kind of stuff. Okay, my lemon. Same thing. I want to just get that to ground itself so that it's a little darker in there. I want to get a little bit of some of those darker tones that I definitely see in some of the fabric. I don't care if it looks like really, really tightly rendered fabric. This isn't a fabric study. It's just still life, and it's got several different elements to it. So it doesn't have to be this perfectly rendered painting of the fabric there. Okay, so there we go. We'll get a little bit more of that fabric-like feel to it. We can get a couple more hints of some darks in some places. I don't want this part to take over, so I'm just gonna just fuzz that out a little tiny bit more. Okay, there we go. That's better to me. Now it feels a little bit less intrusive or something. Okay, always look at your values and make sure that they just sort of shift from one to another. You don't want to end up with the coloring book look where things have like harsh outlines around them. Okay, last thing that this needs, that I feel that it needs, is, I just need to wipe that a little bit, is some nice intense darks in those leaves. So I'm going to go back to the Prussian and some of that raw sienna. Okay, we'll get a little bit more raw sienna in there just so that it gets nice and thick. I'm even going to put the tiniest bit of some alizarin in with that. Alizarin, being a red opposite of the green, is going to neutralize and darken it. Nice, perfect shadow color. Okay, so we're going to throw some of that in. Probably going to look really dark and scary when we first do it, but it's what is going to make this area up in here really start to pop. Okay, so we'll get a little bit of that. Use your whole brush to get those nice marks made that will really give it a sense of confidence. You know, you don't want it to look, and you can really tell, you don't want it to look like you were afraid to touch the paper. I've seen so many paintings that look like, oh, they're drawn well. They are, the colors are mixed nicely, but it's just like, looks like there was so much hesitation in the way that the paint got put on the paper that they just don't work. And so don't let yours fall into that trap. Be very, 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 very confident when you put the paint down. Paint like you mean it. Just really, you know, use the brush to your advantage. Plop it in, let it really, you know, really connect with the paper. You know, anything that needs to get adjusted, we just fix it later. It's no big deal. So that ran over the edge of the jar a little bit. So what? We just lift it out a little. I'm going to show you one other thing, and then we're going to probably call this done, because I don't, as I said before, I definitely don't want to overwork anything, because once it's overworked, as you know, you just can't pull it back. Okay, we'll just darken that a little bit. If you ever have any areas that you feel like you want to go back in, let's say that you didn't save enough whites or something, you can always make some adjustments with some gouache. Sometimes you can even pre-plan that you're going to do some things with a little bit of gouache. It can be introduced in a way that it is subtle, and so that it flows with the rest of your painting. The thing that you don't want to do is only use it in one place to correct a mistake, because then that spot is going to call so much attention to itself. It's going to be like, oh yeah, she didn't save the white there. She had to put some gouache in there. If you use it in multiple places, it won't appear that way. Now, what I put out is not gouache. It's actually a little bit of some Daniel Smith. It was actually titanium white watercolor, which I don't really use, but that's okay. We'll use a little bit of this. I just happen to have it. So let's say that you wanted to steal back just a little tiny bit, of some lights in a few places. Just get a little bit of that, you know, maybe put some, the more water you put in it, the more translucent it will be rather than being opaque. And you can use a little bit of that to suggest maybe some mild highlights. You can also, there's nothing to stop you from mixing it with the colors that you used in your painting to, you know, maybe create some of that pinkish tone that we see in there. Okay, so if you wanted to get a little bit of some extra value shifts on your flowers, That's the way that you can get there. But as I said before, do it throughout, like maybe throw even a little bit of it, like a hint of getting some sort of pinkish tone in on your, on the vase, right? Where I've messed it up over there, I can throw a little bit of that in, that'll steal back that edge. You can even suggest a little tiny bit in the patterning. So as long as you don't just use it in one place, no one will like really even notice that it's different from the rest of it. I would use it very sparingly. I wouldn't use it like in a lot of places. You could use it, oh, let's say you wanted to steal back a little highlight on some of the fruit. That's another place you could do it. And you could also do it with, this is just a colored pencil. So you want to put a highlight on something, you can always do it with a little bit of colored pencil. Again, not a lot, just do it sparingly and try to do it in more than one place. Last option, and this, you have to have your paint has to be dry. Otherwise you'll end up, it won't stick and it'll mess up the pen. This is just a gel pen. You can always use a little bit of gel pen too, if you need to steal back any little bits away. I know some people use a razor blade, some people, I really dislike that masking stuff. I would rather, I can always spot that stuff from a mile away in a painting. It doesn't, I think it looks very, very unnatural in the way that it goes on the paper, in the way that it blocks out the places that you maybe want to preserve your whites. Learn how to paint around stuff. Go back in, make some little adjustments like we just did there. It just looks so much better when you have those really, really hard edges. If you are going to use it, then get rid of the really hard edges that it leaves behind. You know, whatever you have to do to make that happen. It just really is just sort of like a pet peeve of mine, because it doesn't sort of flow with the rest of the painting. Anyway, that is, I would say, going to be about it for this one. So how are we on time? Oh, good. We have 15 minutes. So we can do a little bit of some more sharing, a little bit more friendly critique, that kind of stuff. So does anybody have anything they want me to take a look at? It can even be some of the, if somebody else has any of the monochrome from before that they want to share, I'm fine to look at more of those, whatever you want.
Let's see. Thank you, Anne. I think that's great.
Oh, thank you.
It was incredible watching you and trying to paint at the same time.
That's hard. Well, I always say to my students, you've got the demo tape, so just like watch it as many times as you need to. The nice thing about that is you can always fast forward to the part that it's like, all right, I got the rest of it, but let me just watch this part again. So, okay.
So it looked like Mary Thayer, were you holding up something? Oh, yeah, okay. Mary.
Ooh,
You're
oh,
muted.
let's see that.
You're muted, but
Yeah, you just have to take yourself off mute. We good?
yeah.
Yes, okay. Mary, that is beautiful. I absolutely adore your monochrome. That says so much with so little. The color one is good, and I like your color mixing. You've got a really nice range of values. What I would suggest is you take a little bit of some dark neutrals, maybe not quite as dark as your darkest green, and still in the green range, but not quite as dark and as color saturated as that. And really look at those shapes you made in your monochrome there. And in this area, if you could just get that same, there's just this continuity that you've got in that monochrome that is close in the color version, but I feel like it needs a little tiny bit more connection in that one spot. That is really, really nice. You've obviously, you've worked in watercolor quite a bit, I would imagine.
No.
Oh,
I take classes from Annie.
Okay, well, do you work in oils? Because that has a very oil painterly look to it, which I happen to love. So very nice work, and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Let's see, anyone else? Renee, hold on a second, I'll highlight your video.
Okay. You're gonna just, if you back up just a teeny tiny bit so we can see the whole thing, that looks great. That is really, really nice. You have paid attention to and really zeroed in on the forms and their geometric simplicity. I love that. I love the way that you've presented the vase too. It's very, very elegant and simplified in an elegant way. The one thing I would suggest is that in the leaf area, yours looks like mine did before I put the rest of those lighter ones in. I get some lighter leaves in there to just fill in a couple of those gaps, but really nice job. Your colors look nice and clean too.
Thank you. It looks different on the camera.
They always do. You know what I do when I work?
Camera.
When I'm working, it's really funny. When I'm working and I'm doing these demos, it's like I look at my paper, but then I look up at the screen because then I can see what everybody else sees. And if anything is off, oh my gosh, it just screams right out at you. It's like, oh, I got to fix that. But yeah, so it does get, it's like looking at your, and this is actually a really good way to check if things are doing what you want them to. Look at your work in a mirror. It will definitely, if there's something that you can't figure out what is wrong with this, look at it in a mirror, you'll see it right away. So that's another tip that I'm sure you've heard from many other people before.
Yes,
Okay.
thanks, Mary. So we'll go to Kathy Hall.
Hi,
next.
Kathy. How are you? You have to take yourself off mute.
Oh, yeah, no,
yeah.
I think she's off mute.
There you go. You're good. Okay, now we can hear you. That looks really nice. Your pear has such a beautiful shape to it, and it just sort of appears out of that shadow. I love that. The lemon and the orange are doing that as well. I love the tones that you have on that vase. That white, any white objects, they always have, they're just such a good subject matter for watercolor. I like your flowers and your leaves. I would get perhaps just a little bit, and I could probably do this on mine as well. Just let those edges of the flower, of the leaves rather, just sort of flow outwards a little bit more. I kind of did a better job on that in my monochrome, but that will just give it a little more fullness up at the top and make it kind of almost creates a canopy so that your eye doesn't just sort of go out of the composition. Very nice job. Looks good.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Let's see, can I show mine now?
Of course.
Let's see. I need to replace Spotlight. Okay, here we go.
Oh, I'm getting the same thing from yours. It's the little square in the bottom. Hey, that looks great. Now that's on in that same teeny tiny format that you did before.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that is cool. That's not easy. That's not an easy thing to do, to work quite that small and still capture. It's like, I love painting like a big landscape on a teeny tiny canvas. That's always a big challenge. That works though. That really, it didn't get that itsy bitsy look to it that it can when it's that small. You got some nice range of values. I think if you just, and I kind of did this at the end, if you just darkened your shadows under the fruit and back in here a tiny bit, it will make that pop a little bit more. It's the watercolor doing its dry lighter thing again, but nice job.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let's see, trying to go back here. Oh, Chris, just a second, let me.
Okay.
Yours. Okay, Chris.
Hi, Chris. Let's see what you have. Okay. Oh, beautiful study. Both of them. They both really have a nice continuity to them. I love the colors in your color one, and your values in the monochrome really, really look good. The whole thing holds together very well. There's some really, really good painters in this group. I'm really impressed. You guys are really showing some nice things. What did you think of working this way? Did you like it?
Oh, Chris,
Chris,
you're on mute.
Yeah, you got to unmute yourself. Whoops.
Well, it looks like we may not.
Okay.
be able to hear Chris. But,
Okay.
oh, there we
There
go.
we go,
Well,
finally,
there
sorry.
we go. That's all right.
No,
What did
I,
you think of working this way?
I really liked it. I've never done the, doing the value study first.
Yeah, and it
I've never
doesn't
done that.
take that long. It's like a quick
No.
little one.
Yeah.
You know, if you keep what I also sometimes recommend is to have a little sketchbook of watercolor paper that you just, it doesn't have to be even as big as this, and just do those quick little thumbnails to work out the values. I had a student who used to take my classes in New Jersey who used to do that all the time. Her work she saw so much growth in such a short amount of time when she started doing that. Her paintings are really, really beautiful. So good. I'm glad everybody's kind of getting into doing that little value study thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Your colors looked really good on the color one.
Anyone else looking in here? Oh, Nancy, looks like you've got yours.
Robley?
Okay, Robley, we'll go to you next. We'll go to Nancy.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna just grab a drink of water
Okay.
here.
Nancy.
I think we have Nancy, yes.
Okay.
So I'm not quite
Okay.
done, but I figured I'd put it up.
Okay, no, that's fine. It's definitely fine to show it in process. That is looking great. You've got some really pretty reddish tones in your tulips, and I like that a lot. And you got that nice bit of warmth into them. I love the way that carries down into the bottom part here. I would just take a little bit of some blues and just integrate that into the shadows a little on the table. It'll actually make those reds and the oranges pop a little bit more, but it looks really nice. Good job.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Anyone else? Oh, Robley, we're going to you next. Okay.
Okay, hey, that looks great. Wow, you've got beautiful greens in that. What did you think of it? Did you like the color combinations that we had, or did you do something different?
No, I just sort of, I didn't actually pull them out. I just sort of approximated.
That works. I tell everybody always stresses so much about what color did you use? Is it, I don't have that, what should I use? Approximation is the best way to go. It's not a recipe. It's like, you'll know if it's working or if it's not. That is absolutely working. I love that strong shadow that you put on that vase. You just said dark side, light side. If you got not quite as dark as the shadow you have on the vase, but just a little slightly darker with the one that's back over here, that would pop that even more. Really nice though. Good job.
I want to say one thing about Robley's.
Yeah.
Notice the improvement from the first demo to the second. I noticed it right away when you showed the color one. How much better
You
it
got
is.
used to it. You got used to it. Yeah, because you worked out all the bugs in the first one. You get used to the shapes, you get used to the forms, you know the values, and then it makes it that much easier.
Yeah, Robley, I really love the shadow, just that one brush stroke on it.
Yeah, exactly. It's wonderful. That's what I was talking about with that efficiency of brushwork. You absolutely captured it in that. And your shadow behind it does that as well.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see, anyone else? Oh, Jennifer is the second here.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. You unmuted or you? Yes, there you are. Okay.
So, well, my light is kind of, there we go.
Okay.
Better. I already had a graded wash that I love, and I did not do the first painting that you did, and I think it really helped.
I think it will. I think if you try it, so try it some other time. That's all. Try it with, you could even try it with, if you wanted to paint something, if like, okay, I painted this, I'm bored with it. I totally understand that. If you have something in home that you want to set up, try a monochrome of that and then do it a second time with the colors. I think you've got a good start there. The thing that throws it is because you did the graded wash, the bottom half of the jar ends up feeling like it's like the wash is on top of it. That would be a hard thing to excuse me, sort of
get
get away
past.
from. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could, if you wanted to fool around with gouache a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I always say when you have one that you don't feel connected to or invested in, sometimes you let loose on that and you end up with a really wonderful piece of work. So maybe try a little bit with the gouache to pull back a little bit of some of those whites where you've got that blue wash covering it up.
Yeah.
That might actually work really well and give you a nice painting. The thing is, if you use it there, use it somewhere else so it doesn't look like you used it to correct something.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So Anne, we're out of time, but maybe it went really quickly. I don't know about other folks.
I know, it did.
If anybody who didn't share before maybe wants to share, we have time, maybe one more person. Barb. Yeah, we'll go to you quickly here. Just
quickly, because.
Okay.
Anyhow.
Oh, wow.
So
That looks amazing. And you don't paint in watercolor.
I do not.
Oh, you do now. That looks terrific.
Well, thank you.
It looks
like
very, very three-dimensional. You should like it. I think it looks great.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. And
All
thank
right.
you for sharing it.
Cool.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm going to put up a slide here of Anne's classes. And oops, let's see what I've got here.
You know what? I can also type in the chat. I'll just type my website. Yikes. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, take a class. Here, I'm going to type it in here too, so that in case you guys want to look at it, you'll have it in chat. That's where all my classes are listed. And if you go to my website, you'll see I was talking about the fact that I have a workshop coming up at the end of August. Okay, so the classes that are listed online, let me just do this really fast. Let me just organize my thoughts. The classes that are listed online under that take a class section, those are all online classes. Okay, coming up in I'm in the middle of May classes now. I do have a workshop, a one-day workshop. I believe it's on May 19th. It's in the afternoon. That is called Drawing with a Brush. We will do the monochrome stuff and the color just like we did today. That's a one-session workshop. It's only $20. It's an hour and a half and it's in the afternoon. Would love it if you guys wanted to give one of my online classes a try. That's a low commitment one because it's just one session. The other ones are either 3 or 4 weeks. They're online. I have a shorter schedule, 3 days a week. Right now I've been teaching 5 days a week for summer. And then the live class that I'm going to have is for people who are traveling to it, but I'm also inviting people who are local artists. My artists that I know from the East Coast, they would love to meet other people from here that are painters and find out about the kind of things you like to paint, how you like to work and all that type of stuff. That workshop, people who are coming in from out of state obviously need a place to stay and they need meals and all that kind of stuff. So the price for them is going to be a lot more than it is to attend on a daily basis. So you can attend it for 1 day, you can attend it for 2, you can come to the whole thing, whatever you want. I have it all broken out and that's in that second URL that Ed had on the slide there, which said Boulder Local. That if you go to that, you'll see what all the different options are. But that would really, really be fun to have some of you there. And I will probably, in addition to that, as the weather warms up, have some more outdoor local classes. So if you go to my website, you'll see there's a thing that on the first page all the way at the bottom that says stay in the loop. If you add your email to that, you'll get my class announcements and stuff like that. That'll be there. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. And Jill, I believe you're going to add the recording to our YouTube channel.
Yes, hopefully soon. I just realized tonight that I never did last month's meeting, so It's been kind of a crazy month. But yes, I will hope to get that up as soon as possible. And yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for recording it today. And so I think we've got some really nice comments in the chat, and I think everybody really enjoyed it today.
Oh,
So
good,
it was
good.
so much fun. I don't ever paint in watercolor, but the paintings behind me are in egg tempera. And so
Oh,
this is
wow.
very
That's
weird.
not that far off from gouache. That fabric study that you have there is just fantastic. It's lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Please check our website about our July art show, and hope that you can all submit. And maybe Anne, you can do a bee painting for our July shows.
Oh, that would be, well, you know what? I'm judging that, I think. I'm supposed to
Oh,
judge
right.
some show. I'm not sure. But I'll throw a bee painting in there anyway. Why not? I don't mind.
Sure. You'll have to
I'll
become
give
a
myself
member.
an award. I would love to become a member. That's cool. Yeah, no, this was wonderful. Really, really very, very talented group of people here. Thank you all so much for sharing your paintings so freely. I love that. I think that we all learn from one another, and that it always makes a class more interesting when people share their work. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think this is really good about building community as well, and sort of having people share their art. It really does.
Yeah,
all bring us
definitely,
together. Right.
definitely. And I'm new here, so it's wonderful to meet like-minded people. I really appreciate that.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we hope to see you next time on June 9th. And we also the art critiques on Saturday, starting in June 5th, I believe. So see you all next time. Take care.
Okay, sounds great. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.